Hello and welcome to Raising Anchor, your podcast and source for all things Rhode Island FC. I'm your host, Matt Entrican, coming to you on Thursday, May 22nd. RIFC emerges victorious from Alling, blanking the Rowdies 3-0 with 3 out-of-this-world goals. Has this team finally found their form, and can they maintain this momentum through the month of May? We're going to find out just that as they take on the Pittsburgh Riverhounds this weekend, looking for their first ever goal and their first ever win at home. Joining me as always and continuing the services in the main chair back at the studio is the one and only co-host, Mr. Jason Carey. Jason, how is it going, my friend? And it's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, buddy. Doing well. Just, managing some canine logistics through this nor'easter, Lots of moving parts here. Had to reach out to some business partners, get some cross-functional synergy going in terms of, a lot of dogs.
I don't know what you're talking about. It is 89 degrees and sun shining out right now. I don't know what your nor'easter problems are. They sound so foreign to me.
I always like to say that I don't believe in the dumb actions that I have any sort of consequences in the world. But last weekend I was cleaning my room and I did pack away all of my winter stuff. So maybe I cursed us.
You know better. You know better than to do that kind of stuff. So this is on you. This has nothing to do with me not being around and enjoying warmer weather in different places all around the world. I'm a globe jet setter right now, Jason. Yeah, just going around different. I'm not done either. My journey, who knows where it ends? I don't. But it's good to be back. I want to start things off and just say, so that everyone can hear how incredibly proud I was of you being able to not only start a show, but complete a show last week with the talented Ryan Davis. It wasn't that I knew you couldn't have a conversation. It was more all the bells and toggles and switches and all that stuff that I've never really shown you. And you even said, I don't know how to do the music parts of this. I barely know how to do the music parts. So I was really fun watching as a fan for the first time ever of our own podcast. Don't ever leave me, but I'm glad that if I'm not around, you can hold down the fort. You did so well. So thank you and congratulations on that first one. Ryan was awesome, by the way.
Yeah, of course. It was easy with Ryan Davis, of course, one of our best guests here. It was funny. I did take a few minutes to kind of poke around through StreamYard and how do I manipulate things? I think some of these are actual JPEG files that I can't edit. So it was funny where Ryan Davis's title was perfectly fine. But if you go back and watch the video version, it says on one part, it says Jason Carey, and then below it says Matt Entrican. So who knows who I am?
I love it. Well, let's get into this. We have so much to go over, lots to catch up on. The chat's already on fire. William, always hello to you. And yes, Matthew Jean, I am wearing an AS Roma scarf from the game. I got to go and have an amazing experience watching some worldly footy. And it was really great to see Claudio get his retirement. I did not expect it. I actually saw a lot of things. I'm not going to sit here and talk about my trip because I hate people that I went abroad one time and it's my entire identity now.
My entire life has changed now.
But 3 things did happen on this trip that were completely unplanned. One, I knew I was going to the Roma game, but did not realize. I knew the stakes of where they were at trying to get into the Champions League for next season. Had no idea it was a retirement party for Rainer. 2, I ended up in an Italian regatta with some weird paddle racing, and it shut down an entire city. I got trapped somewhere. And then 3, I actually attended the very first American Pope service completely by accident. I went to go see the Vatican. Was way too many people. I didn't understand it, and then found out that it was his very first service. So I'm just in the right place at the right time, apparently, these days. But that is all I'm going to share. People aren't here to go through my vacation scrapbook. Let's get into this. Let's talk about some honors for the week. First one being, of course, Coach Cano Smith getting named to the Team of the Week as the coach of that squad. Jason, this is what happens when you win 2 games on the road back-to-back. Any surprises here on Coach Cano getting the nod?
No, it's good to see him get the recognition he deserves, even though we know that he's not a big fan of these nods. But I think it is important because it does show how well this team has done, especially after a bit of a slow start here, that things are kind of turning around. We're getting some other nods here too in some different categories. So even if the end of the day, no one's going to technically remember those accolades if the season doesn't pan out a certain way. It's good to get some recognition for how the team is currently playing.
I was curious. I only saw Koke Vegas get on the bench for Team of the Week. Surprised to not see any of our players, whether it was the many contributors to each of the games. Maxi Rodriguez, I thought, was a fair candidate with both a goal and an assist this week. Should we be concerned that the USL Championship HQ just doesn't want to love Rhode Island FC too much just yet?
No, I think that when we look at the game, 3 different goal scorers. Maybe if someone had a hat trick or a brace, you might have a quote unquote standout. But it's definitely one of those games where it felt like kind of everyone performed at a very high level. It's just with his 5 saves, Koke Vegas kind of performed at an extra level to keep that clean sheet for the amber and blue there.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that because there's a little bit more of a record that was made from that save. So we'll get into that a little bit later in the podcast. And then moving on, of course, Clay Holstead, back-to-back champion now in terms of goal of the week. Only shoots bangers, Jason. He graciously offered in the Instagram stories to give it to Zach if Zach was feeling like he needed it after having his own worldly against his former club. This was a bit of a trap. People, when you get 2 options, especially as Rhode Island FC fans, you can delude your own numbers, and all of a sudden, neither one of them gets to win. But the Rhode Island FC faithful, they coordinated, they collaborated, and they said, hey, like one of them has to win over the other. And I think rightfully so, Clay absolutely deserved it for a second time back to back here. Any surprises on that goal? I mean, we're going to talk a lot at length about the goals in general, but anything spectacular about this current result or how fans are finally starting to wake up and vote for their favorite players?
No, it's great to see him get the back-to-back nod. Maybe Clay gets it because that is what he's known for, bangers. I think personally for me, I kind of liked Hervo's finish a little bit better, but all 3 goals very similar. I think there just seemed, Hervo seemed more like almost like a curling shot. Holstad's was just like a knuckleball to the top corner there. So just very much a personal preference. I think any of the 3 would have been a great choice for goal of the week there.
Yeah, and that Rowdies keeper was just like, how does this keep happening in the top left corner? Like, I mean, he had a good showing in the stops that he was supposed to make. Rhode Island FC just decided, hey, like we've been getting yelled at all month long that we're trying to walk it in. So let us just fire from distance. And it was just great to see just goal after goal after goal in the same corner.
I went and checked afterwards. I'm like, are they specifically targeting him? Is he not that tall, but he's 6'2" and a quarter or whatever, kind of same height as Koke. So I don't know. It was just the luck of the lads. They just they were feeling it, that top corner. They, on top of the fact that maybe Tampa left a little too much room there for them.
Yeah, and you would think that Tampa would have learned to have taken the higher step up instead of dropping into the low block and engaging them a little bit further up, especially after the second one. I mean, Noah, if you saw him when he scored his, he was just giggling because he's like, I guess I can do this too now. And so it was great to see. Let's get into this recap here. Rhode Island FC, like I said, avenged its worst loss in club history at All Lang last year. Remember, for the fans that maybe weren't in tune with this team last season, we played Tampa Bay very early in the season. It was I think, 3rd game of our career, and it ended up being the worst performance of all time, losing 4-1 in that match. Ironically, that game following Wednesday's 1-0 win against Birmingham Legion marked the first time in club history that RIFC earned back-to-back shutout wins on the road. It was the 3rd time stringing together multiple wins on the road, and it matched the equal win of the season, winning 3-0 away, first against Oakland Roots and then against the Tampa Bay Rowdies. Like we talked about, those 3 bangers from Hervo, Holstead, and Fuson matched the earlier affair against Oakland. But I would argue, Jason, that unlike the Oakland game where we kind of just had a run for a very short period of time and just completely disorientated the Roots in a short span where they just couldn't quite figure out what to do next. Tampa Bay was meeting us all across the pitch. This was a hard-fought victory. It didn't feel like it at first. I mean, the first goal coming right at the dying moments of the half, But the next two goals didn't come for quite a while. Tampa Bay very much in the game until they weren't, but they looked dangerous all night. It was great to see Rhode Island keep this, momentum going as they've charged up the table. Now they're in sixth place in the Eastern Conference, only 5 points behind behind fourth, and they have a game in hand. This game was different from Oakland in every way, right?
Yeah. Speaking of Diego here, I think I actually remember about 10, 15 minutes in where Tampa Bay was putting a lot of pressure on. They started attacking us right off the bat. And I was kind of telling us, like, I don't know if I'm getting a great feeling here. Maybe things are starting to come into play for Tampa. The kind of the cogs, the wheels are turning. And it was very much a hard fought match until, even after the first goal in the second half, it very much felt like RIFC had to really fight to get all three goals. You wouldn't, like, knowing the final score, you kind of wouldn't have expected that from that match.
I imagine, I wasn't at the watch party, but if Colin was there, I'm imagining he single-handedly spurred this offense into their greatness with his catchphrase of "shoot it." So I'm sure he was he at the away party?
Yeah, he was there. I think they were just they were channeling their inner Colin. He didn't even need to shout it out. They just knew that he was requesting it of them.
Absolutely. So let's get into and before we kind of kick things off here, there's been a stat we've been talking about for a while, and that is the fact that when this team goes up in the first half, they have not lost a game. It's now 17 matches where that has happened since the last time. Jason, do you want to take a guess? We've talked about it multiple times. Do you want to take a guess where the last time we have faced an opponent where we were up first and then did not win out or draw that match?
Yeah, so the last time was actually against Tampa Bay in that 4-1 loss where Chico scored in the first half and we kind of capitulated there in the second.
Yeah, so it was an incredible game for so many different reasons. Let's get into the lineup itself. I don't know how much of a surprise the fans thought about this. I think there were some great additions that were added to this starting 11, but walk us through who actually played on the night.
Yeah, as always, we got Koke Vegas in net with a back four here that we're continuing to see with Sanchez there in the left back spot, Mabika and Stoneman as our center backs, with no Darcy playing our right back, kind of right wing back position there. Those two holding mids, we've got Harivo and Holstad with the three cams or attacking midfielders. We've got Fuson, Rodriguez, and Quezera with the one and only Chico up top.
Yeah, and then in terms of that bench, it was Jackson Lee, Joe Brito, Rio Hope Gunn, Taimo Okiyoshi, Amos Shapiro-Thompson, Cole Dewhurst, and Krifa Yao returning to the squad. I think the big talking point, we'll talk a little bit later about Mabika's performance, but Krifa Yao, it's going to be hard for him to get back into this lineup. I was surprised also that Marky Barra didn't make the trip. We've seen him dress for games now and warm up and be ready for substitution opportunities in the home matches. Him not traveling, I don't know if he's got a nagging injury that just hasn't quite healed and it's not worth, flying a player down versus being available at home. But otherwise, we keep talking about, last week in the match before, Amos Shapiro-Thompson's contribution and why he was a quote unquote necessary starter. Now he's back on the bench, obviously made a big contribution in subbing in early for Quezera going down. Don't know the extent of Quezera's injury. Not sure if it's something to do with an injury from a concussion protocol, heat exhaustion, just the fatigue of multiple games. Again, what was it? 7 games or 5 games, in 14 days. So not really sure there, but overall, we were talking just weeks ago, Jason, that we didn't have the depth, and I think it's still missing in some places, but it's like suddenly we have positions covered in kind of every worst case scenario now.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Karifa Yao there, but also, he was brought up only very recently, but Rio Hope Gunn has been very solid, and now he finds himself in the bench position there, and I kind of wonder going forward how will coach manage the squad here to keep them all happy and engaged, because the one thing you don't want is if you have trouble with too big of a squad is trying to keep people from turning sour and kind of poisoning the locker room, right? If you have guys who feel that they are up to the task of playing and maybe they're not getting minutes, I mean, specifically in certain positions where we maybe have too many people, it could give coach a bit of a headache here. Granted, we're still in the Jägermeister Cup, so I assume we'll probably see a good amount of rotation through those games, and we'll see how that progresses throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, and that also includes the fact that we haven't yet seen Bacharach or Rivera take the pitch, right? So that's even more depth problems, especially on the back line for a later point. It's been fun. I'm starting to try to pull those baseball stats, those oddities about where we see the most success on the pitch and who are the contributors so far. And the fun facts that I've got so far is with both Mabika and Rio Hope Gunn joining this team, haven't seen a loss yet with the addition of those two players. So not sure if they're a good luck charm or if they've just completely helped, solidify that back line. Obviously, Hope Gunn has a little bit more time with the team in that regard, but it just feels like a different group now with the inclusion of those two players. And it's exciting to see.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, with all the people we haven't even seen, I'll be curious how we manage that going forward.
We just need that final loanee player that's going to be a forward, winger, or striker, preferably a striker, and then that will make this team extra complete. So we're due for one more MLS loanee, right? We had 2 last season. It makes sense to now get one on our belt here.
Yeah, why not? I think we could use a little bit of depth at the kind of striker / attacking mid. The one thing about Doyle there was he was a flexible player in the sense that he could go up top, he could play out wide. And just to maybe have someone else there to kind of help out when maybe Chico and JJ aren't 100% healthy.
Agreed. But you know what? Hey, a striker wasn't a problem on the night. I know Chico probably would have wanted that goal, that the really dangerous, the highest XG chance created on the night, but wasn't meant to be. But that's okay because, again, we scored 3 incredible goals. And so I want to break those down. Obviously, everyone's watched them a million times now. But as we look at the stats, the XG, Jason, it tells a different story, right? And I think when we talked to Kaler, he said that XG kind of is a useless stat depending on where the goals are scored, because while the closer you are, the more dangerous the look is, the more likely it's supposed to be converted. Teams that can score goals from opportunities further away, they're still going to win the game outright. And that's exactly what we saw in this match. I mean, I think it was a whole point or a whole complete basis point in terms of difference between these two groups. Are you surprised that despite having 3 goals, we only got a 0.5 XG?
No, not at all, because all 3 of those goals were from range. They're from positions where you expect the defense to step up to make it difficult, and you expect the keeper to kind of have the time or wherewithal to kind of stop it. Those shots tend to be a lot more difficult. I mean, we've seen the guys in training before, right? How many times do they actually hit those? They'll sit there and Noah will be training like after everyone's gone, and he'll be practicing and practicing and practicing. And obviously it's a little easier in practice, but in the heat of the moment, the flow of the game, if it was that easy, we'd see a lot more people score from that range. The reality is then the reason a lot of people have shifted more towards this kind of XG model is to try and find the way to make goal scoring, quote unquote, easier, right? Like, what are the points in the box that you're actually more likely to score? And then how do we create chances in those areas? Whereas anything outside that box at that point is very much just a kind of a bit of luck, if you will, right? We were rolling 20s the whole night at that point from that range.
I mean, yeah. And, again, you look at it, 11 shots from Tampa with 5 on target, 13 from RIFC with 7 on target. It was kind of a complete game in the sense of the closeness of it. I think where Tampa really ran away with any of the stats of, domination, where they were definitely feeding more balls in from corners and crosses than we were. We were playing a very, I don't want to call it direct game. We were definitely favoring the left side through Aldair Sanchez, and then the combinations, especially after we saw Jojea go out Amos kind of tucked in more because we didn't have someone talented to shoot from that right side and then cut back in. But having said that, like, we played a game where we tried to drive through the center, and we've seen so much of the effort in the early days of this year where we would try to go out wide, use the flanks. Without JJ Williams, I think the crossing is still there. Don't get me wrong, but I think if you want to say it's a blessing or it's this like silver lining, not having a target forward like JJ on the pitch has made us be a little different in how we've approached heading towards the opposition, especially after we've recovered the ball or blocked it out and kind of reclaimed possession in that middle third. We're going to talk at length here in a minute about the possession, so I don't want to go ahead and like go to there. But were there any other stats besides the possession one and the passing that kind of really made you scratch your head? Again, like 0.112 to 0.75 xG, but after that, this game felt pretty much like it could go either way until the goals actually got registered.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised that the shots were, I guess, that close. It did feel like you said, like I said earlier, in terms of the 3-0 scoreline and then the actual game kind of feel like two separate things, where it felt like a much closer game. But then I was thinking back like, oh, we won 3-0. It was easy, right? And then you look at the stats and like, you know what? Actually, Tampa Bay didn't make it that easy for us. They had a lot of good opportunities, and Koke stepped up big. So it could have been a very much different story on another night. I think you're muted, Matt.
That's awkward. No, it's all good. I've got the beautiful USL analytics from Blue Sky, who's been producing some data. He has not given me permission to use this, so full transparency. I've asked multiple times, but he must be so busy. Well, he must be so busy creating all of this beautiful data that he hasn't had a chance to respond yet. But I want to put this out here, one, to give fans the opportunity to, if you're not following USL analytics on Blue Sky, like that needs to be something you do right now while you're listening along, or when you're done listening, go and make sure that you create that, because he's created some incredible graphics. Like, we get all this data, but his ability to visualize it is simply stunning. And when you look at the shot map for those of you watching along, we had some dangerous chances in the box, but the reality was, like, I don't think I've seen this team take as many shots outside the box in, I want to say, at least the last 4 matches. We had this tendency to want to get the final pass into the 18-yard box. And like, now here we are, just super comfortable taking long-range rockets. Is this something that will be an anomaly, or do you think this is a new dimension of the attack and we're going to see more of Rhode Island FC get comfortable taking these longer range shots?
I think it's a bit of an anomaly. I mean, that's Clay range, so he's always going to be shooting from there. But I also, like I mentioned, Tampa Bay just gave us too much space in that regards. Like that little kind of box outside of the box there, where they were not stepping up and closing us down like a lot of other teams don't give us that space, right? So we're kind of working around trying to create those intricate passing sequences to find an opening. Tampa Bay was very much sitting further back and just kind of allowing us to take shots in that area. So the lads just said, why not? And they gave it a whack.
So let's talk about the goals and the significance of them. Obviously, first, Clay Holstead burying that rocket. I think Ryan Davis called it a scud missile in the broadcast. He scored it in technically the 50th minute. There was a lot of extra time because of Georgia's departure and the time that it took to get him off the field, but scored it in basically the 45 plus 5. And I mean, just talk about starting things and setting the tempo. Again, this team, when they score first, amazing things happen, and taking advantage of that in the dying minutes of the first half was a huge boon to Rhode Island being able to kind of really do what Rhode Island does best when it comes to controlling the game in the second half.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder if it's confidence based, like if it's something that can be kind of learned in regards to a trait where eventually they can feel more comfortable. We've seen in the past, it's not always the case that they can have really good second halves. But like, speaking of Clay here, his third of the 2025 and his second in the USL Championship so far. 6 all-time with Rhode Island FC. I think all 6 absolute bangers. I mean, that's just what Clay does, right?
So I don't know if it's all 6. I know for sure 3 of them have been scored from outside the 18-yard box. So even if it's a 50% conversion,
one of them was
incredible.
also the indirect free kick. That's a banger too. So
yeah, that
4 out of 6. Yeah.
And then Grant Stoneman also opening his assist for the first time in his Rhode Island FC career. Remember, last year he had some Vincent Company worthy goals at kind of a greater distance himself, so he finally gets on the assist scoreboard. And then, of course, got to move on to Harivo's goal. And again, I still think Holsted's was the better one, but just knowing the weight behind the goal getting scored against Tampa Bay, you can't not say in the 73rd minute that this one almost had a little bit more gravitas, a little bit more passion, a little bit more meaning to it than what Holsted had put up earlier in the first half.
Yeah, Harivo's first this season and 5th of his Rhode Island career so far. Definitely a bit of an extra dimension to his game here. I remember when we signed him last year, we pulled his stats, and scoring was very much not something he ever really did. I think maybe only had 2 to 4 career goals over a pretty long career here so far in the USL. So I'm expecting to kind of see that number go up a bit there, especially with the way that RIFC likes to attack.
Yeah, and I mean, think about it too. Like I don't know this, and I know I get to talk to the players a lot, so I'm not saying something because they said it and I don't have a confirmation. But when you talk to Zach about his time at Tampa Bay, I know that he feels not robbed, but like one of those situations where he came on, he had an assignment, he was going to be that defensive midfielder in the Robbie Nielsen system, and then got his injury, and then was not going. First he had a smaller injury, lost some time, lost his starting spot, wasn't really getting much time. Then he had his bigger injury and kind of had seen on his career, I don't want to say evaporating, but there wasn't going to
flashing
be a place
before his eyes, if you will.
Right. And there wasn't going to be a home for him at Tampa. So when a player leaves their club, whether for right reasons or wrong reasons, and then gets to come back. I mean, we joke about this for every RIFC alumni player now, that they're just going to score against us because that's what you do. Take a look at what Zach did against Birmingham Legion last year. Again, another one of his former clubs. I think we need to loan Zach out to multiple different teams for just like minutes, get him back, and then he'll just score after game after game, because he's got personal vendettas there.
And then when we move on here to Noah Fusons, that was his first of the season, and actually his first since the winning goal in the 2024 Eastern Conference Final.
The Spider-Man goal was his last goal before this. That is wild. That is a wild stat to have.
I'm really hoping that this kind of maybe, is a boost for his confidence, if you will. I feel like we haven't seen the best of him just yet this year. And I think there's definitely another level that Noah can take his game to.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also too, Sanchez got his first assist, which is weird to say too. That feels like that should have happened 3 to 5 games ago, just because of the number of crosses that he pumps into the box, the number of corners he gets to take from the right side. When I saw that stat, I was like, wait, Sanchez should already be on the board for this. How is this not a thing? So it's exciting to see both of those players get their firsts. And of course, like I said, back to the Harivo goal for a second, Maxi Rodriguez getting his second assist, and now he's back-to-back goal contributions. We've talked all season at length that we need Maxi to start contributing. And someone wrote into the podcast. I know we haven't done a Monday mailbag in a long time. I promise we will do one this Monday coming up. But someone wrote in like, hey, did you know that after you interviewed with him, he's now had a goal contribution every single game? Well, now I just need fans to tell me what's the player we need to talk to next to get. I think it's going to have to be Chico. I think I'm going to have to request Chico as our next player and get him back into to golden boot status because he needs it. But it was good to see, and it's just exciting to see these the players look happy, right? And I think that's the ultimate storyline, because at the end of the day, these guys are human beings too. They look like they're having fun out there playing their game. So super excited to see. Any final thoughts before we move on to the kind of the big storylines?
No, 3 bangers.
Who could ask for more, right? So let's talk about that scoring first piece. You know, I mentioned it twice now. We talked about how the last time was Tampa Bay, but I want to talk more or unpack about how this team is just stronger when they don't have to chase the game, right? We haven't yet seen a game this season where they've clawed back a victory. We've seen them claw back a defeat and, you know, make it an equalizer, but we haven't yet seen this team struggle to find answers. And I don't know that they have this yet in the tank for them, but when this team scores first, Jason, it becomes easy for them. Like, there's something about the system that Kano has designed, whether it's the current version of it with the 4-2-3-1 or the legacy 3-5-2. But when this team gets that first goal, and you know, people can say, yeah, if you score first, it's easy. But the reality is some teams can't hold on to leads, right? And like, that's not a problem for Rhode Island FC for the most part. I think they only have 2 draws when they score first. That means 15 wins in their column. What is it about this team that when they score first, like, why is this so easy for them?
Part of it might just be the style of the way that they play in regards to when they go up first. At that point, they can continue to play their game, continue to play the style that they want and that coach wants. I think when they go behind, there's a little bit of pressure of like, well, maybe this isn't working and maybe we need to do something else. You start to maybe second guess some decisions, maybe start to rush passes. You can get a little bit sloppy, and at that point, it can be very easy to give up another goal. So soccer is very much a mental game on top of, you know, all the skills and tactics of that thing. Being able to remain calm under pressure to kind of play the style that you are like as a player and also in the system that coaches employed you in.
Yeah, no love for Dikwa in the chat today, and which is weird because, again, if we live by the philosophy of scoring against former teams, we're playing Pittsburgh not once but twice. So you want Albert Dikwa out there. You want him taking this personal.
With the way he's been working on assists, I think people are being a little too hard on him. I think it's unfortunate that when you score, was it 22 goals in one season, you put a very high bar up for yourself at that point. You know, I think if he can get to, you know, maybe 10 goals again around,
and he scored 10 goals last season. Like, that's back-to-back double-digit seasons. I need to go back. I don't remember his 2023 stats, his 2022 stats, but I'm pretty sure in 4 years in the championship, he's got double digits in 3 of the 4 years. If chat wants to go find it and throw it up and correct me if I'm wrong, but like, he's a streaky player, but he's gonna find 5 to 7 goals this season. I know that we want him to be the guy, but like, I'm not worried about him as much.
If he can throw 5 to 7 assists in there, I mean, that's double-digit goal contributions.
Yeah, I'm truly not worried about him just yet. I think he suffers from a little bit of misfortune. I mean, like the run in, the max. I mean, he did everything right. He was at high speed. He was at like 5th gear. Rodriguez throws a low cross, something we see far too few, and it's one touch, it's on frame, and you know, it didn't go in. So like, I think Albert Dikwa's going to be fine. I'm curious. The only thing I have left is that we've just never seen Dikwa and Williams work together well. Like, we've never seen the unlock of the poacher with, you know, the immovable force. We haven't seen that synergy, probably because they just haven't had enough playing time. That's another stat. So producer Torin, I know you're on. Oh, there he is right there. We need to find the stat on how many minutes the two have shared on the pitch together, because I bet you that would be a very surprising number in the grand scheme of things. But anyways, everyone's arguing in the chat now. We got to move on. I want to talk about the defense here, Jason, because major props. First and foremost, we talked about how Tampa Bay was desperate for a win in front of their own home fans. Much like Rhode Island, home fans have not yet experienced a home victory this year. But unlike the Birmingham game, where, you know, I don't know, we didn't get to talk about it, and I know you moved really quickly through with Ryan Davis, but the Birmingham game felt more like a failure of our offense to capitalize on the man down and like have 6 goals, right? Birmingham was never dangerous. They were not in that game. Tampa Bay was very much in this game. And the Rowdies were constantly hounding the Rhode Island back line, multiple looks on the goal. They were getting behind every single goal, like at speed too. Like they loved to kind of bypass that back line and just take a dangerous look. And Koke Vegas was like, I don't think so. Like you mentioned at the very beginning of the podcast, Koke Vegas had some really big numbers here for this particular game, and bigger than I think fans realize.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, Koke Vegas made 5 saves. The last time he did so was August 24th. And that was against Loudon, if I remember correctly.
Correct. That
and
0-0.
Yeah, that clean sheet was his 4th of the season and the 11th of his Rhode Island career so far. So yeah, I think just a really good performance. Really quickly, when you mentioned back to that last Birmingham game, if I remember correctly, I think their keeper had 5 saves, and I think he was very much keeping them kind of in the game to the dying minutes. That's kind of how more I saw that match play out.
Yeah. And I mean, not only was it a clean sheet here, it was a clean sheet last week. It was the first back-to-back clean sheets that we've had away. And it's like you said, it's the 4th in 9 games. Right now, we are looking really good defensively. Only New Mexico United and Las Vegas, New Mexico has 5, the Lights have 6, have more clean sheets this season. So Koke highly indexed right now in his attempts. And when you see that it's not just, a keeper that hasn't been tasked or challenged, but, again, 5 saves plus the clean sheet, like that kind of is just as big of a story as the 3 goals that we saw on the day. But of course, defense is not the glamorous thing, right? It's not the fun, exciting thing to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. It's odd in a way because with how kind of rough the season started to a certain extent, it doesn't feel like we've been that great defensively. But I think the reality is it comes down to just really small mistakes that have cost us. And in the grand scheme of things, the defense hasn't actually been that bad. They've just gotten punished for making poor decisions in, bad places of the field.
Right. But so speaking to the defense beyond Koke, because this was not just Koke's time to shine. Stoneman had a huge block. Mabika had a huge block to help Koke. And, I read it online. First, I read it from one person, but then I saw multiple people kind of like bandwagoning on this idea that Mabika has this problem with his clearance strategy where, the ball comes to him and rather than turn and look for the pass to like recycle and start the counterattack in a dangerous moment, he just kicks it out and, he kicks it to the sideline versus, just making sure that it's a corner opportunity. Some of the fans were like talking about, hey, like that's not good enough. How can you as an MLS defender be someone who kicks out? That's exactly what we've needed. When you talk about the mistakes where we try to hold the ball for the extra second or we take the look and then we get punished for it, I'm totally fine with one of our defenders clearing the ball to the sideline if that's what needs to happen versus, making the mistake that's going to cost the goal. I don't know if I'm the norm on how that should be considered the appropriate behavior or if the sport has evolved and I'm missing something, but do you have a problem with Mabika's game so far?
No, I think he's been very solid. I think maybe part of that just comes down to his comfortability in terms of how long he's been with the team. Maybe he'll get more comfortable in regards to kind of making that pass. But at the same time, I don't think it's sometimes you just got to boot it to Rosette, right? Like there's just not a good option, right? And I think that too many people are like, well, we all have to play tiki-taka and always pass it. But sometimes if you don't, like in the heat of the moment, a split second, just boot it out of there, right? To prevent a goal. Let them figure out how to get back towards you again, as opposed to giving up possession in a bad spot and potentially giving away a goal.
Yeah, and I think Diego here writes it the best. Coach Cano definitely cares more about the defensive solidity, so he must be happy with that. And I agree. I think that shape and the ability to absorb attack is more important than finding the breakout pass to catch a team on the counter. And that goes beyond just the last few games with Mabika now starting. I'm going to ask you, and this goes to the totality of the season, Jason, would you believe that if I told you that we've allowed the second fewest amount of goals against in the Eastern Conference so far this year?
Maybe not. But also, I know I recently we were talking about them having the third. So considering we kept a clean sheet, so it makes sense. This team is getting stronger and stronger defensively. They're not making silly mistakes like they were early on, and the team is looking really solid right now.
Yeah, I mean, and that goes through all of the times where we saw like there's hiccups. This team isn't taking the step. They're not reacting to the special set pieces or the corner kicks where we were getting kind of early season just raked over the coals about. But defensively, this team has now come together. I made the joke earlier that it's the inclusion of Mabika and Hope Gunn, but the reality is it's been all of them. And so really, I think what happens next is you have tools now. You have the ability for coach to set up his team on game day based on the match day, right? Based on the starting 11 for the other team, or at least the starting 11 he thinks, or just based on the wear and tear. Grant Stoneman is not going to have to play every single game for the rest of the season. Krifa Yao won't have to play every single game for the rest of the season. That's really exciting, knowing that we're already this good and players are finally going to get some defensive rest, because I think that was probably towards the end of the season last year. One of the biggest pain points was that like some of those players, like I remember Frank Nadarce in the right wing back experiment in the Lou City game. I've never seen him so dead tired before in his life. Like he usually had an engine, and you could tell like that just wasn't what he couldn't run another minute, let alone another step. So it was just, it's good to see that we have these rotations, and this defense deserves a lot of praise right now in keeping Rhode Island where they are on the table.
Finally get to go all gas, no brakes. We got people on the bench, you know.
And hey, that's a big deal, right? We talk about the game changers off the bench. We usually make the joke about super sub Joe Burrito, and we now have defensive options there too. With Rio Hope Gunn being able to come off the bench, that's a huge unlock for us, in my opinion. But on the defensive side, I want to talk about kind of the possession side of this, and this is where we really need to talk about what has changed here in the month of May for this team. You know, first and foremost, are we a possession team now?
I mean, maybe. When I went back and looked at it, with the exception of the Detroit game for kind of obvious reasons, RIFC's actually beat their opponent in possession in every single championship match. If we extrapolate it to even Open Cup and Jägermeister, the only other game that we didn't beat possession was Portland Hearts of Pine. So we dominated Westchester, and then we dominated the Revs even in possession.
Yeah, and it's not like 51 to 49. It's 58% here against Tampa Bay, 58% against Birmingham Legion, 62% against Monterey Bay FC for that 1-1 game where we felt that second goal coming if we just had a little more time. 56% against San Antonio in the home opener. Like, these are significant possession stats. And I actually ran it back against the 2024 standings. And so far, our possession here in 2025 has increased by 7%. Overall, when you look at that, what that looks like. And then also our passing game has significantly improved as well by over 50 passes per 90. Last year, our average, or not our average, but our ability to break into 500 passes only happened 3 times across the entire 2024 season. We've now done that 3 games in a row here, breaking 500 passes. Ironically, Jason, 2 of last year's games where we had 500 passes, the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. So it's perfectly set that we have a double header, so to speak, against them here to see if we can get 5 games in a row with 500 passes. I'm excited beyond belief.
Love me some good stats there. Let's pump up those pass numbers.
But here's the thing. Okay, but here's the thing, right? The possession and the passing is completely different from what we saw in 2024. We talked about how this was a fast team. This is a quick team. They wanted 2 to 3 passes and then to move vertically and move the ball up the field, right? Whether that was through the wings or centrally, it didn't matter. But this team wanted to catch in the middle third and go, right? They were a disruptive team. They were a counter-attacking transition team. Now, and part of that is when we score first, we're a team that wants to recycle possession. We want to break down a defense. We want to draw out our attackers and try to ruin their defensive shape and see if we can have a look at goal. And if we don't, we're fine with recycling the ball again. This new passing and possession style, especially in these last 2 games, it's really starting to frustrate these teams. We've now seen back-to-back games with a red card from our opponents because all they can do is foul our players and say, like, we need the ball back. We're not happy with this situation. So we're going to slow down the tempo of this game, and we're going to try to see what we can do to mix things up. Rhode Island FC is quickly becoming a very frustrating team, and they're playing in a style that, I mean, yes, we've seen it now, but it's starting to change how we've watched this team with field tilt and everything else to it. The only thing I can think of is that, like, where I've seen something familiar, I see this in Wilfried Nancy's Columbus Crew, which ironically is the coach that Coach Kano partnered with to get his coaching licenses was Wilfried. So it's like, we may be playing a version of Kano ball is now Kano Nancy ball, and I'm here for it.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to think about what we did last year that was successful, but also realize that every year the league changes and evolves, and like you don't want to stay the best coaches are not stagnant, right? There's always little tweaks. In some ways, this is very much just a upgraded version of the tactics of last year. It's not like all of a sudden he completely flipped it on its head and everything is completely different. There is a lot of last year's team still here, a lot of transition over, and we're just seeing little kind of tweaks here to kind of throw a wrench into other teams' game plan against us so that we're not too predictable.
I totally agree with you, but I mean, you can't deny these numbers. Stoneman and Mabika obviously partnering together for almost 60 passes each, and then Aldair Sanchez and Clay Holstead just knocking on the door of basically 60 passes. The entire defensive back line through the back four and plus our kind of double pivot were just really comfortable taking their time to thread the needle before moving the ball forward. Maxi Rodriguez, we've seen him have I won't call it a discipline issue, but like when we're not getting forward, he'll start to come deeper back to collect the ball and try to move it forward. Amos Shapiro-Thompson's just wherever he wants to be. But this team's really learning how to build the ball successfully out of the back. And like, I think that's exciting because, again, we've seen this team struggle with that when it comes to, going from that explosive counter to what they are now. And then just to borrow these final stats from USL Analytics one last time, look at the verticality. I know we talk a lot about the side to side, and some of these can kind of, they are still in a sense recycling the possession because when you look at how far forward our back line and our middle third really is, but like we're starting to still pass with purpose and probe and then bring it back, right? Whereas before it was just shift to the right, move the shape, now shift to the left like it was a dance number. This team is finding unlocks here. And if this is a taste of what it's going to be for the rest of the season, like we're due for some really exciting performances, regardless of the opponent. When teams can break down a defense like this and take their time with it, they are the worst type of opponent to have to face. And Rhode Island is quickly setting themselves up to be a true threat here in the Eastern Conference.
Absolutely.
So and perfect segue.
Yeah. Speaking of the Eastern Conference, RIFC here now are undefeated in 4 matches, currently sitting in 6th place in the Eastern Conference on 12 points, now on a 3-3-3 record, perfectly balanced. They come back home this week to host a Pittsburgh Riverhounds side. Only the second club they were unable to best last year out of the Eastern Conference. Very much a frustrating opponent for us last year.
Yeah, and not only not best, but never have scored against them, similar to Loudoun United, our other dark horse, if you will. So it was a 0-0 and they were here at Bern, and then we lost to them 2-0 last season. So Pittsburgh's an interesting team right now. They're technically holding down that final playoff spot in 8th place now with 8 points on a 2-2-5 record. They're winless in their last 5 championship matches. And while Lily Ball, we've talked about it, always the defensive first kind of unattractive, wholesome American soccer that it is, they're currently tied in 2nd place for worst offense in the league. Danny Griffin's the only player who's registered multiple goals on the season. And it's this lack of offensive production that's really hurt the Riverhounds because their defense is, pretty solid, but when you can't get a goal scored, it's hard to make a meal out of, a 1-0 loss or a 0-0 draw or a 1-1 draw. They're just not finding the opportunity to score in the back of the net. You know, to be fair to this Riverhounds team, though, also some of these stat lines and some of the results are partnered up against the fact that, like Rhode Island FC, they haven't been at home at Highmark Stadium a lot yet this season, which is interesting. I thought we had a Northeast problem. We may just have like a Northern problem. I don't know where that imaginary line gets drawn, but they are winless on the road so far this year with a 0-1-4 record. They've only played their 3 games, like I said, at Highmark, where they've had that 2-0-1 record. But those 2 wins also, Jason, they're against bottom of the table standing teams. So it's like, you know, you're supposed to get those wins, but at the same time, that's not necessarily a good pressure test or a good reflection on the quality of this team. So the defense is right now better than average, but their offense is the worst in the league. This is a hard place to be a Pittsburgh Riverhounds fan right now.
Yeah, definitely. And we think about like last year, right, and how they really frustrated us with Lily Ball. They were incredibly tough to play against, but when we then saw them, you know, it was that infamous 0-0 draw there. When we moved on to like later on in the season, they picked up Jaquesin, and they kind of thumped us there in a sense that we really weren't in a bad spot, right? We finally kind of come into our own, but we just didn't find any answers on the night. It wasn't, I don't think, like a bad per se performance from RIFC. Very disappointing.
Oh, I think
frustrating.
It was the worst game of the season minus the Colorado games.
You think RFC was that bad? That
well,
game?
So okay. So here, so I don't think
and I think
individual
this
talent.
This is our conundrum where I think we have different views on like how we perceive a game to be bad.
I don't. Right? Well, hold on. I'll say my part, and then maybe you can fill in the gaps here. So one, the 0-0 draw at Bern, I think, was the origin of Draw Kings. By the way, I think that was the first time we ever said that moniker. But I do think that when Lily Ball beat us 2-0 at Highmark, with current RIFC defender Danny Rivera picking up the assist on Sample's winning goal, I do think that game was the worst game of the season for Coach Cano. I think that matchup was a situation where Cano deployed a team that was not best suited to take on the Riverhounds, and the tactics that he wanted to implement didn't suit what was needed on the night for Rhode Island FC. The big one there was you look at the what was it? Panayiotou was out on the far wing. It was the first time we had seen him get a start there. There was a midfield swap up where we just weren't quite the same team that we had, because remember too, that loss against Pittsburgh, that ended an undefeated streak of 6 games. It was right before we got the goals galore against Miami, but if we had won that game, we would have won like 12 games straight. So I didn't think it was necessarily a performance issue. I thought it was a tactic issue, and Coach Cano didn't set his team up for Lily Ball in the best way. So that's where I thought it was one of the worst games we played of the season, because I think we also only got like 1 shot on target. I'd have to pull the stats up, but it was a bad strategic setup. It wasn't necessarily the players lacking for effort.
Okay, I think that's absolutely fair. I meant more from the players' perspective, right? I didn't feel like they weren't out there trying. It's just they, ultimately couldn't do anything against Lily Ball.
Oh yeah, I think the loss against Detroit at home or the Phoenix result last season were probably our worst player performance games. You could pick between the two, but yeah, I think this was more of a tactic setup. So
absolutely.
So then let's get into this kind of where the Pittsburgh Riverhounds are so far this season. Right now, coming off of a fresh, painful loss, losing last night 4-1 to the Philadelphia Union in the Pennsylvania Derby. This is my take on it, having watched the game. I thought some poor refereeing at the very beginning of the game kind of set the Riverhounds up for failure. Early yellows, an undeserved penalty. And I talked to some people at length that said, hey, it hits the arm that high, it doesn't matter, it's a penalty. I just didn't see it. So I thought Riverhounds kind of were playing kind of on the back foot away at the Union Stadium the entire match. That being said, Jorge Garcia channeled his inner Clay Holstead with that U.S. Open Cup goal. That should be a contender for at least goal of the week for the Open Cup, maybe even a contender for the totality of the tournament at range. Jason, the Riverhounds were the last team in the Open Cup from the championship. Obviously, there's a difference in quality between MLS and USL. But I want to ask, is there anything that has to do with why we don't have a championship team making it further now? Is it just the quality, or is it the way we've reformatted this tournament? And, with MLS teams now coming in a little bit later, they're allowed to make the decision, since they're a little bit closer to hardware, to field a stronger starting 11 if they so see fit.
Yeah, I think that we're always going to kind of get the short end of the stick there, right? If you even compare it to the FA Cup, if you will, or there's still the larger teams definitely have a lot of benefit there. I think there's maybe less of a gap though between some of the championship sides and some of the Premier League sides. Part of it's just unlucky. I think I saw a stat on Reddit earlier that 2015 was the last year where we did not have a USL championship team progress. I mean, there's a reality in terms of the money that MLS sides have, hashtag not an MLS podcast, but like, it's not even their MLS 2 squads, because I don't think that those are actually that great. I think that there's maybe talent there, but it's very raw and undeveloped. I think the reality is the depth is starting to get more and more with these MLS squads, where early on you used to just have throw in some DPs, a few other decent players, and some other guys who are like on practical USL salaries, like $30K a week. Now you have what is the lowest salary, like hundreds, thousands of dollars or something. So
I think it's 92,000. I think it's just shy of 100.
So your worst quality player is maybe like some of the best talent in USL equivalent. So there's just kind of a money thing there that we really can't fight. And the fact that it's been since 2015 where we haven't had someone progress, it's just a bit of an off year. Did you see that the Revs lost in front of 12 people at Providence College?
I did see that.
Part of me, so I looked at that squad that they put out there, and I know some of it was weaker due to the fact that there are some injuries that they have. But also part of me thinks that they actually don't care about the Open Cup. They just didn't want to lose to us.
And we know that. We know that from the post game from Caleb Porter, where he literally said out loud that he prioritized the game against us because he didn't want to lose to us. And he specifically said he didn't want to lose to a team that was only 25 minutes away. And he told his team they better not lose to them. And he also didn't want to lose to a quote unquote inferior championship side. So I think you're spot on. I think that after he got through that ego bruising, if it had gone the other way, I think he just didn't care, which is a shame because he was 3 games away from hardware at that point. It's crazy to me that you just count the Open Cup, but him, Jim Curtin, and not Jim Curtin, sorry, him. Who's the other coach that's infamously against? Who's the guy in Dynamo now? It's the old DC United guy. Ben something. Chat, help me out. Who's the Houston Dynamo coach? Anyways, those two guys are adamant about their hatred of the US Open Cup, which is ironic because the Dynamo won it right before that coach came in and took over that squad. So it's silly to think that you're that close to a CONCACAF Champions Cup berth and you're I just don't want to play my best team. It's wild.
Hashtag not all MLS podcast. Ben Olsen.
Ben Olsen. That's who it is.
Yeah. And scene here now. We went on our Open Cup hashtag not MLS podcast aside while we are previewing the Riverhounds.
It was a tie-in though. It was a tie-in.
Yeah.
So I mean,
energy.
Philadelphia, they love themselves some Open Cup runs. They love playing deep into that cup. Not always winners, but they love playing deep into it. So it's a shame to see. I'm still going to support the Open Cup at this point. I'll have to pick a team. I don't know who I'll pick yet. Maybe I'll just find the team that hasn't won hard. Maybe it's the Chicago Fire, who haven't won it since or who haven't won anything since '98. Maybe I'll just
Kevin De Bruyne's Chicago Fire.
But it's exciting to see. The only last thing I'd say about the game at Providence is a lot of fans online talking a lot of nonsense about Rhode Island going up and talking to fans. I'm not going to get involved in the politics of it, but like, it is fair game if you come and play in our state and you play nearby, for us to make sure in a soccer event where people are still curious about Rhode Island, it is fair game to go and talk to fans.
Especially when you don't show up to win.
Oh yeah. And I saw someone write this online. Someone was talking smack about the Revs fans online that, are the loudest, saying, well, little brother syndrome, blah, 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 blah. But the reality was, someone, I forget who it was, they said, the people that were talking trash about the Rhode Island FC, they probably didn't even go to that Revs game. And that's the reality of it, right? Like, we're here to meet new people, make new friends. It was a great time. It's something that you should expect to see. So I am in full support, as long as they didn't break any rules or laws or anything like that. I thought that was hilarious. And we posted the video of the Welches, and that got a bunch of hate too. So it's like, I don't ever I don't troll, I don't monitor Revs activity online, but man, those fans, like, and I've said this a million times, Jason, I'm completely fine with you being a fan of both teams. I don't care, because only in the Open Cup is where it has to be Rhode Island FC. Otherwise, continue to be a fan of both organizations. But that doesn't mean we can't take pot shots in the Open Cup period and go after each other with a little bit of banter. It's not serious. I'd love to invite any Revs fan out. We have tickets we can always give. We have our own personal season ticket, membership tickets. If there's 2 Revs fans that want to come out, hit us up on DM, and we'd love to have you at a game. Like, it seriously isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah. I don't know why people got to get all up in a bunches about it. It's
in a tizzy. Yeah. All right, let's get back to the rounds overall, though. Talking about them, they had a lot of movement this offseason, offloading 12 players, bringing on 14 new players. The headline transfer was the signing of Burton. It's Jacqueson, by the way. It's not Jaqueson. Found out oh, now I can't say it. Jacqueson. Dang it, I lost it.
I don't
back
speak
to
French. I don't know.
But he came back on a free after a successful loan spell at the season prior with Real Salt Lake. He scored 5 goals last season in just 8 matches after the move from the RSL side. Fun fact for those of you following along, he opened his scoring account in the championship against Rhode Island FC in that 2-0 loss last season. In this offseason, and kind of where Lily Ball has been building this team, there's been an emphasis on depth in the transfer market this year, adding players who would compete for starting roles throughout the length of the entire season. But, you look at regular starters like Edward Kizza and Ryan Hogan, who made their way out of the club after playing 35 and 26 matches last season. Bob Lilly, a little bit of an experimentation here. We'll talk about the formation and the tactics. Definitely a little bit of a departure from his standard 4-4-2 that he's been playing for, 20, 40 plus years. They had a great run. But now with Kizza gone, obviously we poached Dequa at the beginning of last year. So with those 2 players gone, Augie Williams has now been kind of tapped as the man at the front of the attack. He came from Indy 11, where he scored 10 goals last year, but he hasn't really seen the same success so far in this early look at Pittsburgh, only scoring once in his 10 appearances so far for the season. Ironically, too, again, looking at where Bob Lilly finds talent, Augie was the only player in the championship to come to the Riverhounds. So everything else was either collegiate, out of league, other areas, other regions, but only one championship transfer in this offseason. So always interesting to see how Bob Lilly watches the ball and watches the team. But, I mentioned the tactics have been shifting a little bit here. What can we do to break down how exactly he's constructed this roster for his gameplay in 2025?
And yeah, so under Bob Lilly this season, they're kind of evolving a bit. They're becoming a team who enjoys actually having more possession, as they rank second bottom in average possession last season, compared to now being ranked 11th in the league total with an average above 50% there. Despite the improvement, though, this new tactics here, still a bit of a work in progress, especially against sides who like to press high, something RFC likes to do occasionally. and who are willing to put their back line under pressure here when the ball's at their feet. Known for religiously playing a version of 4-4-2 in prior years, Lilly has changed the shape of this team in 2025 more to like a 3-4-2-1, shifting between a 3 and a 5 back line there, kind of depending upon what phase of play that the team has the ball in, which is very balanced in defense, but it does pose a challenge in attack for Pittsburgh, having struggled to generate chances from wider positions, ranking 23rd in the league in big chances created, only ahead of Hartford, who not doing so hot this year.
Yeah, when you think about the fact that, like, again, when Dequel was at his best, it was a 2-person striker system where he was able to poach and be that fox in the box. And so departing from a 2-striker system is an interesting change, puts a lot more pressure on a player like Augie to shine. I don't know. I don't remember what Indy's formation and style was. I'm not sure. I'm assuming
like
it was well suited.
3-4-3 or something like that, I think.
So that's interesting when you have to be the guy up front. Obviously, the rest of the team's going to come around you, but to see that change, I'd be really curious to understand why Bob Lilly is evolving his tactics, because he's notorious. He's the Bruce Arena of the USL Championship. We're notorious for having a very rigid style. And again, it's never been attractive. It's never been pretty, but it's always gotten results. It's always shown through. And so it's interesting now to see him kind of change it up.
Yeah. And so in terms of other like attack oriented issues there, overall, it's one of the worst attacks in the league statistically, ranking second to last for total goals scored with only 6, averaging less than a goal a game at this point.
Oof.
Yeah. Defensively, Pittsburgh has been solid throughout the year with their back 5 out of possession, placing them in the top 10 for clean sheets and goals scored against. But when you can't score, that's going to be tough to pick up points there.
Yeah, no, that's not good. Let's talk about the ref assignments before we get into these formations.
Yeah, and so the head ref for this match will be Greg Dopka. The first assistant ref also then is Christian Cleric. Assistant ref 2, Tom Felice, and the fourth official, Kyle Averill. Dopka is a little familiar with Rhode Island, as his most recent match was the Open Cup between Revs and Chicago Fire. Dopka appears to be the kind of ref who definitely is going to insert himself in the game, as he's well above the foul index average, ranked number 3rd in total fouls called. But he's also someone who doesn't seem to go to the pocket often, as he's the 3rd lowest in league for cards per fouls at 9.7. Kind of feels like Encarnacion is a little bit similar to that, right? He
How dare you say that name?
Loves to call fouls, but not necessarily loves to pull out the cards there,
Yeah, I think based on how I've seen Kano interact with the refs, like, he's getting a yellow card for sure in this match, because he does not like when the refs, they stop the play over and over. He'd rather see. I think Kano would rather see the cards come out, and whether it's his team or the other, and then just move past it. But the worst thing he hates is when he can get away with it. I will say this too, by the way, against Tampa Bay. I'm not saying our defenders were falling over, but they are learning how to take hits and sell the contact. Like we've talked at length over the last 2 years. This is a team that like brutalizes their way through. They fight through the contact. I think they're starting to demonstrate, like, because the rest of the league does it. And I don't like this about it, but definitely, and I wouldn't say overselling or exaggerating, but earning their fouls the same way that the rest of the league seems to be on par for doing it.
Yeah, as long as they're not embellishing it, I'm okay with it, especially because being quote unquote honorable doesn't get you anything.
Agreed. Getting into the injury report here, we've got only 4 players that we know of. Isaac Anking, he is right around the corner. Again, we talked to him last week. He's looking to get cleared for May 31st, so should be available very soon. Do not expect to see him right away. I no clue if he'll be there for that Puerto Rico game, but remember, we didn't see Amos Shapiro-Thompson again for 2 months after he was cleared. So take his time. Hugo Bacharach should be kind of around the same timeline. We should be seeing him by midweek, by the midpoint of June. along with Danny Rivera. He should be back by either, next week or in the next 2 to 3 weeks at the absolute latest. JJ Williams, we're going off the report from Tom Quinlan. I still haven't had a chance to confirm with the team, but he heard 4 weeks as of last week. So again, mid to late June for JJ. We didn't write it in, but I'm just going to say Jojea probably, I have him in the starting 11 for the game, but if he's on a concussion protocol, I don't expect him. So that could be just an interesting one. And then, no idea with Mark Ibarra, because 1 week he's not available, 1 week he is. I think he's fit to play, but unfortunately with me being out in the world, I cannot get that information as easily as I usually do. On the Pittsburgh Riverhounds side, it's just Charles All. He's got a questionable status from an ankle injury that he's been recovering from. So unclear if he'll be available on the game itself. Jason, walk us through what we think will be the starting 11 for this matchup this weekend.
Yeah, so we are kind of predicting pretty much an unchanged lineup here with Koke Vegas in net, a back four there of Aldair Sanchez, Aime Mabika, Grant Stoneman, and Frank Nodarse, with Zach Caravo and Clay Holstad there as your holding midfielders. Attacking mids of Noah Fuson, Maxi Rodriguez, and Jojea Quizera. And as we mentioned, that's one where we're a little questionable on because we don't know what his status is. If everything's good, I think we will see him play. And then, of course, up top, the one and only Albert DiQuachico, with a bench there of Yao, Amos Shapiro Thompson, Okiyoshi, Hope Gund, Joe Brito, Lee, and my glasses.
Cole Dewhurst, the legend
Cole Dewhurst. Okay, yeah. That's some small text there. And for a second, like the face, I'm like, wait, who's that?
We met Cole's dad at the Revs game, and we had a good conversation with him. He's a really good dude. Can't wait to see, and he's just excited to be a part of the team. So just can't wait to see what kind of minutes he may get this season as CB number. He still will always be CB number 5, even though we've brought in a lot more after him. What are your overall thoughts on this lineup?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think coach, when he sees good results, really likes to kind of reward the players who got him those results. And then from there, he'll kind of start to make tweaks as maybe the game doesn't go our way, if you will, and then kind of continue to, it's very much like, no one gets to rest on their laurels. Every week you need to prove what's going on. Earlier in the show, we talked about Karifa Yao, right? And then also I bring up Rio Hope Gund, 2 of our center backs who have been kind of our mainstays. So this back four right here needs to, quote unquote, prove themselves in a sense that they are the starters. Or if not, we have players like ready to just kind of fit right back into the squad.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's a weird sense of that, confidence where you have one bad game and you lose your starting spot because there's a player behind you. Like, that's never good for the mentality part. But I think this is going to be a challenge for Kano. My biggest question, Jason, is Karifa Yao right now, because I feel like it's early samples, but I feel like Mabika is going to be a lock-on starter. He's the new Morris Dugan of our time. And, I look at, if he's kind of the lock-on, unless he's out of having a really bad run of games, when you look at everything else, it's going to come down to, game day tactics. Like I said earlier, the fitness, Grant Stoneman, does he need a break? Does he need rest and rotation? Or is it the performance and training? Because, we heard a lot last year, like when Mark Doyle would get a start, it's because he was just vicious in training. He earned his way through into that starting look. But now that we're 3 deep, basically in every role, except for maybe, left wing back, it kind of feels like Yao may be on the odd side out of this. And I only say that because, Yao is known as being the brick wall. He's known as the tank, but Mabika's got the same amount of size. And I don't just mean his height. He's obviously taller, but you're not going to push a player like Mabika down. Frank's just a little skinnier. I've always he's got the height, but he's a little bit more nimble, but it comes at the sacrifice of in the wrong weight class. If Mabika's now in that back line, has Yao lost his spot? Because he, while Yao's solid, he's also the slowest player of the back four, in my opinion. And like, if you wanted to partner him with Mabika, is that the best setting, or is like who is Krifa Yao going to be competing for? Is it Stoneman? Is it Mabika? Or is it something else now?
I think it would be Mabika. I think you don't put two tanks back there and especially like they're not going to be able to keep it up with anyone. Mabika in no way I would say is slow, but at the same time he's not known for his speed, right? You want that kind of that balance. One like slow and movable tank object that no one gets around, and someone with a bit more kind of pace to kind of navigate counterattacks, or if you will, or something to be able to kind of keep up with speedy forwards. Some of it might really just depend upon the opponent that we're playing against, right? Maybe if we're playing against someone who has no interest in moving the ball up top, maybe we're playing against someone with a 4-4-2 with two proper big lads up top. Maybe you put Mabika and Yao back there and just have them battle it out. And then in that regards, maybe if we're playing against a team who has more speed, maybe you swap them out. Maybe you have Darce and Stoneman or something to kind of chase them around the field. I mean, we've got options, right?
I remember when we were talking to Monterey Bay and they were talking about lining up their biggest defenders to take care of JJ Williams, not knowing that Williams wouldn't be available for the game. It reminds me of kind of the quality of offerings that exist when it comes to center back pairings. I just don't ever see Mabika and Yao together on the pitch at the same time. And I feel like it'll always be a quicker player. Yao could swap in, but I just don't see it. The other player that I want to ask about, thoughts on Chico still playing up front, despite the ever hungry Joe Burrito. While we wait for JJ to heal up, do we think that Chico continues to get the looks? I mean, his Opta points last week were some of the lowest, considering he had, a sizable amount of minutes on the pitch.
I think for now, Chico will still get the main minutes there, but if his, him being streaky kind of doesn't produce any assists or goals, and Joe Brito comes on and kind of puts up those numbers, I think we could maybe see some change there. But in the same vein, we've seen when Brito does start, he's clearly an effective player, does well, still gets a lot of shots, but it didn't necessarily produce results the way it does when we take him off the bench. He ends up being a lot more impactful.
I'm sure Joe would hate to hear that we've relegated him to super sub requirements.
I don't like to say it, but it's just kind of how it is right now. I think that it's very much a thing where if he's given a starting position, I think for him to get another starting position, he literally has to score a goal.
Okay, so then we do 45 minutes with Chico. If he doesn't get a goal, he's out. Joe Brito gets a full 45. I'm in. Scott actually asks an interesting question. Do either of you, based on his RIFC appearances, think Mabika is as impactful as Dugan? I think
it's too early to say.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. But also defensively, he's been rock solid. So his stats would tell you he's as good as when Dugan made his impact. And we saw this team kind of tighten up on the goals against and the possession. But offensively, Dugan had a lot more weapons with that left foot, the ability to, his final third pass entries were incredible. He had a kind of secondary or tertiary offensive quality. I'm not comparing. It's too early because we have to see the chances that Mabika would get in that regard. But I mean, if he's in the same position as Frank Nadarce in a couple of matches where he's just getting he doesn't even have to jump. He just stands there and, the ball finds his head and it goes into the back of the net. I mean, we could see something unlock for him considering his height, but I think defensively it's on par in these early first looks. What about you?
Yeah, too early, but so far so good, right? I mean, I think there's comparisons in the way that another kind of MLS player on the out and out who comes into our squad and has found some success and been very solid in terms of defense. Granted, it's a small sample size, so I don't want to get out of hand here, but if he continues to play the way that he does, and we know that he's only going to improve, He's been with us for what, 2 weeks? Has it even been that long? Like,
I think we had him for 3, but he's only played 2. He's played 3 games, 2 of them as starts. So yeah, no, it's not been a long time.
So the fact that he can drop in and play this well, I think that bodes very well for him.
Yeah. And I think Morris even had maybe 2 extra. I think he had 2 weeks before he got tapped. And then like once he started, you couldn't take him off the pitch. But yeah, time will tell. Like, I think that question's a good question, but I think we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait a few more weeks, and then we'll wait until the summer transfer window when Morris Dugan gets, loaned out to this team anyway. So it'll be perfect. I still believe.
Oops.
Still believe.
All center backs.
All right, let's get into this Riverhounds starting 11. We think they're going to play in something like a 3-4-2-1. Eric Dick will obviously be in the back of the net with a back 3 of Beto Yadrak, Sean Suber, and Guillaume Vactor. In that midfield 4, it's going to be Perrin Barnes, Jackson Welty, Daniel Griffin, and Luke Biasi. And then the kind of like wingers, they tuck in a little bit more, so it's hard to call them just wingers. They're definitely more of like paired central forwards, are Burton Jacqueson, Robbie Mertz, and then Augie Williams at the tip of the spear there. Honestly, like, Bob Lilly has rotated some of these players in just kind of the experimentation. Again, he has depth, so he's trying to find the right combination. E2 has been an opportunity. Sample is now coming in off the bench instead of starting. We just mentioned Jorge Garcia having that excellent goal. O'Toole has had a couple of starts at the front line. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what we have, especially with the Riverhounds coming off of their midweek game in the Open Cup. So that's going to be hard to determine. In terms of players to watch, there's really only one that you got to keep your eye on right now. That's Eric Dick. He's the current Golden Glove winner from last season. He had 14 clean sheets in 2024, set a club record with that. Not only did he have the lowest goals against average at 0.69, but he also had the highest save percentage at 0.791. In terms of the competition around other Golden Glove eligible keepers, he was just on fire. Dude's 6'5". I didn't realize it. Every time I look at him, he doesn't look that tall in net, but he absolutely is. And while the Sporting Kansas City project has maybe had his numbers dip a little bit here, he still has 3 clean sheets already this season. Again, thinking Koke has just the 4, so he's only 1 behind, and he's only allowed 7 goals. So we talk about how good these defenses are. The Riverhounds have let more in, but under Dick's watch, only 7 have gone in, and that makes him one of the top 25% keepers when it comes to saves in the league right now. So definitely a player to watch there. Jason, I want to quickly go through these storylines. First and foremost, how does Rhode Island FC score against Lily Ball? We haven't done it yet in the league's history, and we get 3 opportunities to take a look at Pittsburgh this year.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy here. We talked about earlier how Pittsburgh likes to possess. RIFC has been kind of possessing as well too. So that could be a very interesting battle in midfield, especially the way that the 2 teams will line up. I assume that coach will continue with the 4-2-3-1, 1 forward against 3 center backs. How we will win that midfield. I think we'll need to really win that midfield battle there to kind of progress the ball forward to get a goal. I don't want to say they need to change their style, but kind of maybe trying to draw out Pittsburgh to try and find those opportunities, I think would really help RFC as opposed to try and just out and out counter them. Because I just don't think that's something we've ever been really great at in terms of speed. Transitions, yes, but pure speed counters is not something RFC is known for. So I think it's going to be a tough match. I think they're really going to have to kind of poke and prod and really kind of bait the Pittsburgh defense out, kind of tire them out to really get themselves a good scoring opportunity.
Yeah, I remember Marky Barra mentioning that one of Lily Ball's most important things that he drills into his players is the direction and playing without the ball at your feet. So not just playing when the other team has it, but like, where are you? Like, he's very much a formation and shape guy, versus like letting players play with a little bit more freedom. So again, classical like collegiate American coach who has made it through the professional ranks for as long as he has, right? So I think that's going to be a big opportunity. I guess then if the baseline here is finding the first goal against Pittsburgh in club history, there's this other looming target of getting the first victory at the Vault. How does this team do it? You ask the players, they're going to say there's no added pressure. We just know that we owe it to the fans, but there's some added pressure here, right?
I think the longer it goes on, yes, absolutely. It's only been a few games. I think if they just get a win this weekend, it'd be like, a weight off their shoulders, if you will, and everything will be fine. If we find ourselves in another situation where it is another draw, it keeps building and building where it gets more and more difficult. Of course, against the opponent who we struggled against last year, maybe the fact that they have not done very well in front of net and the confidence that I think RIFC have built in the last, week and a half here, I think that'll suit them well. And I think there's a very good chance that we could see the first victory at the Vault here this weekend.
Yeah, I remember last year as the pressure built, they never said it out loud, but there was talk amongst the players. There was a reason when the El Paso victory happened at home, the first home victory, how elated they felt as a result of that, right? Everyone knew they should beat El Paso. They were a dumpster fire at the time, but like just getting the result in some ways was transformative for the group. So definitely want to see that. Going to be interesting to see if they can pull it off here against the Riverhounds. The next question, we kind of talked about the shooting and, is the lower XG, are these outside the box shooting opportunities? Do we need to see more of it? Because one of the things we haven't talked about yet tonight is the stat of, when this team starts to have more looks on net or just more shot attempts, they tend to start, converting at a higher rate. 13 was only the one for this last game, whereas we've always seen that 15 to 20 range. Curious of your thoughts, like, should we just be letting them for distance just to get the numbers in until we can score? Or do we need to find more purposeful attacks into the box and get Chico activated?
I don't think they should just be letting them rip left and right. But I definitely think if they get a good look, they should definitely, go for it. With, Eric Dick having a few extra inches there. I mean, some of those shots you saw, Campesini was not that far off of it. So with the kind of extra height that Eric has there, like he might have been able to get a finger to those if it was him in net as opposed to Campesini. So it's going to have to be a very good shot, I think, to get past him in that regards. If you're shooting from that distance, or you're going to have to hit it from an angle where maybe his line of sight is kind of blocked by maybe some of his defenders. Obviously, Clay, if he's on if he gets an opportunity, he needs to hit those just because that's what he does. And you expect he will score some of those. But I don't think they need to just become long shots FC, if you will.
Are we still accurate crosses FC? That I didn't look at the stats this week. I'm on vacation still, so it was not something I pulled up. But anyways, next question, Riverhounds rotating. Does this Open Cup loss, does this galvanize the squad? Does this deplete the squad as they're coming off a midweek game and we're not? I mean, we just proved last week that midweek, it doesn't matter because we can go do all this incredible stuff. Is this even a narrative that we should explore, or is this a real thing?
I mean, for them in the sense that they're not doing so hot and they have to go, away again to continue. They've lost 2 in a row since their last draw, and they lost 2 before that. So they're not doing so hot. In terms of performance, I didn't get a chance to check that match out. You said they maybe were a bit hard done by there in regards to some ref decisions. I think that they'll obviously want to do better, but I think if anything, I'm not too concerned in regards to that storyline. Maybe they'll be a little bit tired, but these are professionals that we saw with RIFC, especially in regards to only one injury for them potentially, unless there's some others they're not telling us about it. So they have full squad size for rotation there. So I don't think it's too much to kind of ponder.
Speaking of rotation, this will be the first time in club history where we face the same opponent in back-to-back games. Different circumstances, as next week's is the Jägermeister Cup, But what does that say about how these teams set up tactically? I mean, obviously the championship is probably more important, as there's a couple of different group stages still to go in the Jaeger. What does this say when a club, has to line up, figure things out, and then next week we flip the script, go to Highmark, and then have to do it all over again?
It's always interesting when teams play each other twice in a row. Usually it happens because of cup competitions like this, where it's just the luck of the draw. They happen to play the same team the weekend before, and it's like, oh, well, now here's a Wednesday match where we play you again. I don't know. I'm always wary of double headers in that regards, where it feels like you can't beat them both times, right? Like you only get one. So, I mean, hey, if we win at home,
which one do you want? Which one do you want? You want the home win, right?
Win at home, draw away. I'm fine
because
with that.
We can still beat Hearts of Pine, and we can still beat Hartford, and we'll probably advance out of the Jägermeister Cup. So
yeah, win at home, draw away.
Ooh, let's do this. Let's get the win, and then let's get the draw, which will then give us 1 point automatically, and then we get to go straight to penalties and get some exciting showcase, and maybe we'll get 2 points.
Oh yeah, I forgot you can't actually draw in that competition. Yeah. I forgot.
So I'll take the 2 point penalty draw. That's what I want. Yeah. No, I agree 100% with that. And then final question, and I swear I'm not jinxing it, but I did go and look when I was looking at the stats. But so far in the month of May in the championship, we have been unbeaten in May. We have one last game. This is it this weekend. And if we do, we'll close out the month of May unbeaten in that regard. So a couple draws and a couple of wins. Is that something? Is that the sign? Is this the club turning the page here? Because we obviously want at least a draw or a win for Rhode Island this weekend. Is this team now in form? Are we a month earlier? Because last year it was June. It was the Lou City game. Have we improved our year-over-year performance here, and we just activated about 30 days earlier?
I think if we can close this month out undefeated, let's say we get a draw, I think that'll be a really strong performance from the team. So, and then as Tim says, the following Saturday is still May, so there's one other game after.
That's Jaeger. I don't count Jaeger.
Okay, so you're only going to count
specifically championship.
Okay, but that's still an opportunity to just say in all comps.
Sure, I mean we can. Well, we can't do that because we lost to the Revs in Open Cup then, so that narrative flies out the window.
Oh, okay, that was May.
Yeah, I know it's been a busy month.
It's been a month.
All right, Jason, what is right now in terms of the scoring predictions for this? The heavily favored. I mean, fans they're ready. 75% believe Rhode Island FC is going to win. 7% think the draw will happen, and 18% in Pittsburgh's favor. What does Rhode Island FC need to do to get all 3 points for the first time at Centerville Bank Stadium?
I think they're going to need to win that midfield battle, like I said. Press that back line, kind of test them, see how strong they are in terms of their will. Test their Lily ball strength there, and then at the same time, like, take shots if you need to, right? If you get to don't always look for the perfect opportunity. Don't only just randomly shoot. But sometimes after some poking and prodding, you can't find something. I think at a certain point, you just have to have a go. And then from there, try and see if you can win that. If you look for a deflection, look for that second ball, really test the keeper, test the back line. Don't make it easy for them and just pass it around to death until they just, have an easy afternoon where they're just like, no, we can do this all day kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's correct. I obviously the goal is score first in the first half, and apparently just everything will be fine. But I also think patience. I think as we continue to watch this team develop this possession style, this Wilfried Nancy-esque, dictate their terms and be a little unconventional and wait for the opportunity. Again, Lily is a coach that wants the shape. So if you can draw defenders out and destabilize their game plan, like that may be the best way forward. I don't see this being a high scoring affair. I don't think we're going to get another 3-0 clean sheet. I do think this will most likely be a probably a 1-1 draw. I only say a 1-1 because I've been saying draws for the last 3 games, and now we've won some. So psychologically, I have to say this is going to be a draw. But I do believe that whatever the result is, I don't think it'll be a high-scoring affair. Pittsburgh hasn't demonstrated that they can put together a lot of goals, and Rhode Island is still solid defensively. So if things end on the back foot for them in any way, shape, or form, they're not going to get blown out of the water by this team that's not really firing on all cylinders on their offense. So I think if they can do that, like you said, maintain their press in the midfield and win their battles there in the middle third, I think that this team's going to be well suited and perfectly set up to get a promising victory and kind of end the month of May in the right direction. So I love it. I can't wait to see it. Any final thoughts before we get this match info out and get things wrapped up?
No, I'm gonna quote unquote predict the win there. I think it's gonna be 2-0, but I think it'll be very tight in the sense where it won't feel like a 2-0 in the sense of it was very easy. Like one of those score in the first half, maybe in the 9 minutes, and then get another one at the very end, where the entire time it is very much a war against Lilyball.
Yeah, I'm getting flamed in the chat right now for predicting a draw, so I'm trying to defend my status. I think either way, this game is going to be a game that will be. I mean, we've seen these two teams be very scrappy, but I think if they can maintain their passing rates, I think if they can maintain kind of control of it and not let Bob Lilly dictate terms with his squad, I just don't think that they have the offensive firepower, and I think they're going to be just as cagey. I think they're going to be just as defensive. So this will be which team can break down the other team in a very slow and cautious manner. I don't see the explosivity that we've seen in these last 2 games. So that being said, weather this weekend, I know that you guys are all going through a nor'easter while I'm working on my sunburn over here. But the nor'easter is supposed to clear, and it should be a mild and somewhat cool Saturday game. Hopefully just damp or coming through kind of like a post rain opportunity, but should be around like high 50s or like the low 60s. Should still be perfectly suited for soccer weather. But, again, it's Rhode Island. So giving weather predictions on a Thursday for a Saturday is a wild experiment. And then, as a reminder, the gates do open for the parking lots at 1 p.m. for that 4 p.m. kickoff. It's an early game again. You can get in 2 hours ahead of time with the gates to the stadium opening at 2 p.m. This match, as a reminder, is RIFC's Military Appreciation Day to honor those in the military service, as well as commemorate service members who made the ultimate sacrifice. So I know they're going to be doing some events to honor that. And then if you're not making it to the game, which I don't know why you wouldn't, unless you're, just not home in Rhode Island right now, you can watch the game on my RITV, ESPN Plus, or listen along on 790 AM The Score. Interestingly, it's the 3rd home match that Tom Quinlan and Nick Giuliani are covering that are separate from their 17-game away contract. It seems like they're kind of just like activating game after game. We've asked like, hey, are you doing all the home games yet? And they kind of just keep saying, to be determined. So it's good to see them still getting to cover the home games. I think those are just as important to build a voice, to talk Rhode Island FC soccer. So it's exciting to see that. And yeah, you can listen along on 790 The Score.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up. It's been fun. Hope you enjoy some of your vacation, Matt. I'll check back in with you here next week when we review another match against the Pittsburgh Riverhounds.
Well, first we're going to do the mailbag, and then we'll finally bring back the mailbag. So if you have questions for us, if there's a question you've asked in the last 3 weeks, fire it back in. You can hit us up on the social medias. You can email us at the submission form off the website. You can leave it here as we close out the show, and we'll scrape them. But we'll definitely do a Monday mailbag. And then, yeah, excited. We'll see if we can get a Pittsburgh Riverhound guest on so we can mix things up. Maybe Mongols will want to collaborate. We'll reach out to them and see what they're up to next week and go from there. But yeah, exciting times ahead, and I can't wait for this doubleheader.
Sounds like a plan. Well, everyone, don't forget to check out our friends over at the Blazing Musket for all of your New England soccer coverage, and that's including RIFC, and that's at theblazingmusket.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at RIFC Podcasts. We have an Instagram at Raising Anchor, and there's always that website you can check out, raisinganchorpodcast.com. Anchor's up, buddy.
Anchor's up, and don't forget to give my dog a big old smooch on the lips for me. I miss my dog. So take her to an away game next week at the Jägermeister Cup. I'm sure she'll love the guild.
I'm sure she would love to join Lavanda.
I know she would. Until next time, guys. We'll see you all later.